My sister, Susan, lied to our father, and he threw my son Leo's clothes and my work files onto the wet lawn. "Get out of my house," he screamed. Susan laughed. "Good luck surviving, loser." We just walked away. What they didn't know was that in 3 days, karma would hit harder than they could ever imagine. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The pneumonia had settled deep in my chest, a rattling, wet weight that made every breath feel like I was inhaling crushed glass. I was on the sofa, wrapped in the Afghan my mother had knitted years ago, when the screaming started. It wasn't just a regular argument, it was a performance, and I recognized the star. "She's a viper, Dad," my sister Susan shrieked, her voice echoing from the kitchen. "I saw the paperwork on her laptop. She's trying to have you declared incompetent. She wants to put you in a home and sell your house." I coughed, a racking, painful spasm that left me dizzy. "Susan, what are you talking about?" I called out, my voice a hoarse whisper. My father, Connor, a man I hadn't seen raise his voice in the year since Mom died, stormed into the living room. His face was a terrifying shade of purple, his eyes bulging with a rage I had never seen directed at me. He was 65, retired, and, I had thought, grieving with me. Now he looked like a stranger. "You," he roared, pointing a trembling finger. "You ungrateful witch." "Dad, what's wrong?" I tried to sit up, but the fever and the shock made the room spin. My 8-year-old son, Leo, hearing the commotion, appeared in the doorway of his room, his eyes wide with fear, a half-built Lego ship in his hand. "Do Dad me," Connor spat. He grabbed the Afghan, Mom's Afghan, and ripped it off me, tossing it to the floor. "Susan told me everything. You're trying to steal my house, my home." "What? No, Dad, that's insane." I looked past him to where Susan stood in the kitchen doorway. She was filming. Her phone was up, a smirk playing on her lips, her eyes glittering with a cold, triumphant malice. She was a social media influencer, and this was just more content for her drama channel. "I saw the documents, Isabella," Susan said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Estate planning, power of attorney, incapacity clauses. You're a paralegal. You know exactly what you're doing." "Those are Mom's estate files," I cried, desperation making my voice crack. "I'm the trustee. I was organizing them for the accountant, you know that." "Lies," Connor shouted. He stalked over to the hallway closet, ripped open the door, and pulled out my winter coat and Leo's small green parka. He threw them at my feet. "Get your stuff, get your kid, and get out of my house." The words hit me harder than a slap. "Dad, please, I'm sick, it's raining. Leo has school tomorrow, this is our home." "Not anymore," he said, his voice flat and dead. He then went to my room. I heard the scrape of drawers, the crash of my laptop bag hitting the floor. He came back out, his arms full of my clothes, my files, my personal papers, and walked straight to the front door. He opened it, and the sound of pouring rain filled the house. With a grunt, he hurled everything onto the front lawn. The meticulously organized files from my paralegal job, files I was working on from home while sick, burst open, papers scattering and turning to pulp in the downpour. "My work," I gasped, lurching to my feet. The dizziness was overwhelming, but the adrenaline was stronger. "Dad, no." Leo ran forward, but Susan stepped out and put a hand on his chest. "Stay out of this, kid," she said, not even looking at him, her eyes fixed on me. Connor went back, this time to Leo's room. He returned with Leo's backpack and a plastic bin of his most loved toys. He threw those out, too. The little Lego ship Leo had been holding clattered to the floor, forgotten. "Now get out," Connor commanded. I looked at my father, this man who had raised me, who had held me when Mom died, and I saw no recognition. I saw only the reflection of my sister's poison. I looked at Susan, her face glowing with victory. "Good luck surviving, loser," she laughed, her voice bright and cruel. I felt a sudden, icy calm settle over me. The fever, the coughing, the fear, it all evaporated. I turned to my son, who was shaking, tears streaming silently down his face. I knelt, ignoring the pain in my lungs, and put my hands on his small shoulders. "Leo," I said, my voice low and steady. "Go put your shoes and your coat on. We're going to a hotel for a few days. A little adventure." He just nodded, his lower lip trembling. I walked to the hall closet, retrieved my own shoes and my purse and my son's soaked parka from the porch. I didn't grab my coat. I didn't grab anything else. I didn't look at my ruined work files. I didn't look at the bin of Leo's toys sinking into the mud. I took Leo's hand. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I didn't give them the satisfaction. We just walked away. I walked us past the lawn, past my worldly possessions dissolving in the rain, and into the cold, wet night. As I buckled a shivering Leo into his car seat, I glanced back at the house. Susan and Connor were still in the doorway, watching, silhouetted against the warm light. They looked like victors. They had no idea. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They thought they were throwing me out of their house. I started the car, the windshield wipers struggling against the deluge, and as I pulled away from the curb, I thought of my mother. I thought of her foresight, her wisdom, and the legal document she and I had drafted together 2 years ago. They thought I was a loser. They thought I was a paralegal. They forgot that I was the trustee. And as I drove, a new, cold resolve settled in my chest, more powerful than any sickness. They had given me 3 days of sick leave from my job. I would use them. I would use every single minute. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The hotel room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. It was a budget motel off the highway, the best I could find at 9 o'clock on a rainy Tuesday night that would take a cash deposit, since I'd left my wallet but grabbed my purse, which thankfully had my debit card. Leo was asleep on the stiff double bed, still in his day clothes, his breathing uneven, his face pale and tear-stained even in sleep. He hadn't said a word the entire ride. He just held my hand, his small fingers gripping mine with a desperate strength. My pneumonia, ignored and aggravated, was waging war on my body. Every breath was a painful wheeze. I sat in the single, stained armchair, my phone plugged into the wall, the screen brightness turned all the way down. The first thing I did was text my boss, Mark. "Family emergency, extremely sick. We'll be out for the 3 days as planned, maybe longer. We'll check email." It was a lie, but a necessary one. I couldn't explain that my family emergency was that my family was the emergency. I stared at the peeling wallpaper, the events of the last hour replaying in a sickening loop. Dad's purple face, Susan's smirk, my work files, hundreds of hours of billable work dissolving into gray mush on the lawn, Leo's toys, the slam of the door. My phone buzzed on the cheap laminate nightstand. A new text. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the preview was all I needed to see. It was a video. I pressed play, my thumb trembling. It was Susan's footage, of course. Shot from the kitchen, it perfectly framed my father's rage and my own wheezing, pathetic confusion. It was edited naturally. It didn't show her screaming her initial lies. It just started with Dad yelling, "You ungrateful witch." It was a masterpiece of manipulation. I was painted as the abuser, the cold-hearted daughter, and he as the victimized father finally standing up for himself. And then the video link. She had posted it. On her public influencer page, the one with 5,000 followers who hung on her every manufactured drama. The caption read, "So hard to do, but had to finally help my dad stand up to my toxic sister. She was trying to steal his house and put him in a home. Please send strength." The comments were already pouring in. "OMG Susan, you are so brave. Your sister is a monster. Sending love and light, you did the right thing." My blood ran cold, then hot. This wasn't just a family fight, this was a public execution. She wasn't just trying to get me out of the house, she was trying to destroy my reputation. As a paralegal, my reputation was everything. This one video could cost me my job, my career. My breath hitched and a coughing fit seized me, so violent and deep I thought I would pass out. I stumbled to the bathroom, bracing myself on the sink, spitting into the basin. When the spasm passed, I looked up at my reflection in the sanitized, paper-stripped mirror. I was a ghost. Pale, sick, with dark circles under my eyes and matted hair. I looked like a victim. I looked like the loser she'd called me. I splashed cold water on my face, the shock of it clearing my head. I thought about calling the house, trying to reason with Dad. But what was the point? He was under Susan's spell. He wouldn't listen. I went back to the chair and pulled up my email. The first thing I saw was an alert from the joint bank account I shared with my father, the one I used to pay his bills. A transfer. A transfer for $5,000 made 10 minutes ago. The recipient? Susan L. Connor, business expenses. She wasn't just slandering me, she was robbing him. A new kind of anger, cold and sharp, cut through the fever fog. This wasn't grief. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coup. Susan, who had never held a job for more than 6 months, who lived off a series of sponsorships for dubious health teas and bad fast fashion, was making her move. She thought I was weak. She thought I was sick, isolated, and beaten. She was right about 2 of those things. I opened a new email. My fingers, still trembling but now with purpose, flew across the keyboard. To Martin, Beckworth at Beckworth Law, com subject. Urgent. The Connor Family Trust breach of terms. Dear Martin, this is Isabella Connor. We have a severe and immediate problem. My father, acting on my sister's influence, has illegally evicted me and my son from the property at 112 Oak Street. He is in breach of the life tenancy agreement, and Susan is already committing financial exploitation. I am sick, and I am with Leo at a hotel. I have the video she posted. I have the bank transfer. I need the 3-day eviction notice drawn up for Susan. I need the formal cease and desist for Connor. I need it all, Martin, and I need it by Thursday. They've forgotten who's in charge. Best, Isabella. Martin Beckworth had been my mother's lawyer. He was the one who had helped us draft the trust, who had warned Mom about Susan's profligate ways. He was old school, tough, and he hated bullies. I hit send. The whoosh sound was the quietest, most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I turned my phone off, silencing the incoming stream of hate from Susan's followers. I took a deep, rattling breath and lay down on the other bed, pulling the thin comforter over me. Leo whimpered in his sleep and rolled over. I would take him to school in the morning. I would go to a walk-in clinic and get antibiotics. I would drink tea and I would rest. I would do exactly what my father and sister were not expecting me to do. I would disappear. For 3 days. They thought I was running. They thought I was hiding in shame. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten my mother. And they had definitely forgotten about the power of an irrevocable trust. I wasn't running. I was reloading. My mother, Eleanor, was a planner. She was a kind, gentle woman who loved gardening and baking bread, but underneath that soft exterior was a mind as sharp and organized as the legal files she kept for her small accounting business. She loved both her daughters, but she was not blind. She saw me, her little paralegal, meticulously balancing my checkbook since I was 16. And she saw Susan, her wild spirit, who had a charm that could talk a bird from a tree and a credit history that looked like a wildfire. After my divorce, when I was left emotionally and financially shattered, it was Mom and Dad who opened their home to me and a 3-year-old Leo. "This is your home, Isabella, always," Mom had said, hugging me on the porch. "You get back on your feet. You take your time." And I did. I got the paralegal certificate. I found a good job at a downtown firm. I saved. I paid my parents' rent, even when they insisted I didn't have to. I cooked, I cleaned, I took care of the yard. When Mom got sick, I was the one who managed the doctor's appointments, the insurance paperwork, and the late-night vigil. I held her hand as she slipped away, my father crumbling on the other side of the bed. After the funeral, I stayed. Connor, my father, was a ghost of himself. He, who had always been so strong and decisive, was adrift. He needed me. He needed Leo's laughter in the empty halls, so we stayed. I took over all the finances, paying the mortgage, the utilities, the taxes, all from the accounts Mom and I had carefully structured. It was a quiet, stable, healing life. Until Susan arrived, 6 months later, in a cloud of drama and debt. Her influencer career in the city had apparently imploded. A brand deal had gone south, a landlord was suing her for back rent, and her flashy car was, she claimed, stolen, though the truth probably involved a repo man. She showed up on the doorstep with 6 suitcases and a tear-streaked face. "Dad, I have nowhere else to go," she'd wailed. Connor, desperate for a familiar piece of his past, a reminder of a life before grief, welcomed her with open arms. "Of course, Susie, this is your home." From the moment she moved in, the atmosphere in the house curdled. Susan treated the home like a 5-star hotel and me like the housekeeping staff. She slept until noon, emerging in a silk robe to loudly film herself, making a smoothie, using the expensive organic produce I bought for her followers. She'd talk for hours about content and engagement and building her brand, which seemed to consist entirely of taking pouty photos and complaining about her haters. She never washed a dish. She never did a load of laundry. She never offered to chip in for groceries. Instead, she began a subtle campaign of undermining me to our father. "Did you know Isabella is putting whole life insurance on you, Daddy?" she'd ask at dinner, her voice full of faux innocence. "It's just weird, like she's waiting for you to die." "I'm not," I'd say, exhausted. "It's the same policy Mom had. It's to cover funeral costs. We've talked about this." "Still," she'd murmur, "it's morbid." "Gosh, Isabella, you're always in your office," she'd complain, walking past the small desk I'd set up in the den. "Don't you ever spend time with your own father? You're always just working." "My work is paying the bills, Susan," I'd reply, not looking up from the stack of files. So defensive, I was just making an observation. Her favorite target, however, was my job. She couldn't understand it, so she belittled it. "You're just a paralegal, right? Like a secretary for a lawyer? It's a bit more complex than that," I'd say through gritted teeth. "Whatever, I just think it's sad you're so stuck in this tiny town, in Dad's house, with your kid." She'd wave a hand dismissively, her array of silver rings glittering. But her real interest, her pointed interest, was always the house. "This house has great bones," she'd say, pacing the living room, phone in hand as if framing a shot. "I could totally flip this. New floors, open-plan kitchen. It would be an amazing backdrop for my brand." "It's Mom's house," I'd say, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's Dad's house, Isabella," she'd correct me, her smile tight. "And he's not going to be around forever, right?" That was the line that always made my stomach clench. It was the undercurrent of everything she did. She was waiting. She saw our father not as a person, but as an obstacle. She saw me not as a sister, but as a competitor. And she saw Leo. She didn't see Leo at all. The lie she told, the one that got me thrown out, wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was a calculated masterpiece. She had seen me at my desk, organizing Mom's estate files. She had seen the letterhead from Beckworth Law. She had seen the words incapacity and trustee. She didn't understand what they meant. Her mind wasn't built for legal nuance. She just twisted them into the most monstrous, believable story she could. And our father, lost in his grief and terrified of losing control, of being seen as old, was fertile ground for her poisonous seeds. She had convinced him that the daughter who had nursed her mother, balanced his books, and raised his grandson under his roof was, in fact, a monster scheming to lock him away. She had turned my quiet competence into a weapon against me. My stability became a threat. My profession became the proof of my treachery. As I sat in that dark hotel room, the antibiotics from the clinic finally starting to dull the razor's edge of the pneumonia, I understood. Susan didn't just want me gone. She wanted to be me. She wanted the stability, the respect, the house, all of it. But she didn't want to do the work. She just wanted to take my place. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't just take the house back. I had to dismantle the very foundation of her power. She had used lies. I would use the truth. And my truth was written on 32-pound weight paper, signed, notarized, and filed with the county registrar. Day one was about survival. I took Leo to school, lying through my teeth to his teacher that we'd had a burst pipe and were staying at a hotel. I felt the shame of the lie, but the truth was impossible. I spent the rest of the morning in the fluorescent hell of a walk-in clinic, where a stern but kind doctor diagnosed me with acute pneumonia, gave me a powerful antibiotic shot, and ordered me to rest. "You should be in a hospital," she'd said. "Not an option," I'd wheezed. I spent the afternoon in the hotel bed, laptop perched on my knees. The first email I received was from Martin Beckworth. It was short and to the point. "Isabella, the video is appalling. The bank transfer is definitive. I've already spoken to my PI. He'll start digging into Susan's city life first thing. The documents will be ready for signature by tomorrow afternoon. The service is scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. Rest. Get better. We handle the rest." I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. I wasn't alone. I slept for 6 hours, a deep, fevered, antibiotic-fueled sleep. When I woke, it was dark. I checked my email. There was a new message, this one from the private investigator, a man named Mr. Klein. Subject: Preliminary findings, Susan L. Connor. The attached report was illuminating. Susan had not, in fact, left the city because a brand deal went south. She had left because a warrant had been issued. She hadn't just forgotten to pay her landlord. She had been running a scam, subletting her rent-controlled apartment at 3 times the price on an illicit short-term rental site, a clear violation of her lease. The landlord wasn't just suing, he was pressing criminal charges for fraud. The stolen car? Repossessed, after she'd missed 6 payments. But that wasn't the worst of it. Mr. Klein had found a string of brand deals that were just thinly veiled. Grifts. He'd found 3 other influencers who claimed Susan had taken money for a collaborative retreat and then disappeared. She wasn't just irresponsible, she was a serial fraud. My hands were shaking. This was so much bigger than a family dispute. She was a criminal, and she was in a house full of my mother's valuables with access to my grieving father's bank accounts. The $5,000 transfer wasn't a one-off. It was a down payment. My shift from victim to strategist was complete. This was no longer just about getting my home back. It was about protecting my father from the predator he'd invited in. It was about protecting my mother's legacy. Day 2 was for building the case. I picked Leo up from school and took him to a different hotel, a slightly nicer one with a small kitchenette. I told him the pipe was a bigger mess than we thought, but we were safe. He was quiet, drawing pictures of our house with a big, sad X over the door. My heart broke, but I had to stay focused. While he watched cartoons, I got on the phone. First, I called my boss, Mark, and told him the truth. Not all of it, but enough. "My sister is financially exploiting my father. It's become a legal matter, and I had to remove myself and my son from the house for our safety." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Isabella, thank God. We saw the video. We know you. We were all worried. Take all the time you need. The firm's partners are already discussing. Well, let's just say we don't take kindly to people slandering our best paralegal. Our lawyers will be in touch." My firm was going to back me. The slander charge. Susan had no idea what she'd just unleashed. Next, I logged into the trust's bank account. The main account, the one Connor had no access to, was secure, but the smaller joint account, the one I used for bills, was a bloodbath. After the initial $5,000, Susan had gone on a spree. $1,200 at a high-end electronics store, $2,300 at a luxury handbag website, a string of smaller purchases for makeup, clothes, and food delivery. She had drained it. Nearly $10,000 in less than 48 hours. I calmly downloaded the statements. I attached them to a new email to Martin and Mr. Klein. "Add this to the pile. She's accelerating." I then accessed the home's security system, the one I'd installed when Mom was sick so I could monitor her from my office. I had turned it off when I was home, but I could still access the logs. I hadn't turned it back on. But Susan had. She had turned on the internal cameras, the ones in the living room and kitchen. The ones she had no idea I still had master access to from my laptop. I clicked the live feed. There she was, pacing the living room on the phone. The room was a mess. Takeout boxes, shopping bags piled high. "No, Dad, she's not coming back," Susan was saying, her voice impatient. "She's a loser, remember? She's probably crying in some dump. Now about the car. You said Mom's old car is just sitting in the garage. I mean, you don't use it." My father's voice was muffled, but I heard Susie. "I don't know." "Oh, come on, Daddy. I deserve something nice after all this drama. You're going to let your little girl drive around in a beater. My blood boiled. I clicked record. I saved the clip. I sent it to Martin. The trap wasn't just the trust. The trap was Susan herself. Her own greed, her own arrogance, her own complete underestimation of me. She thought I was a secretary. She'd forgotten that a good paralegal knows everything. We are the ones who build the case, find the evidence, and prepare the weapon. The lawyers just fire it. By nightfall on day 2, the weapon was fully loaded. And Thursday morning was just hours away. Thursday morning, day 3, 10:00 a.m. The rain had stopped, but the sky was a bruised, heavy gray. I pulled my car up to the curb a block away from the house. In the passenger seat sat Martin Beckworth, tall and immaculate in a dark gray suit, a thick leather briefcase on his lap. In the car behind us was a sheriff's deputy, his cruiser idling quietly. I was not the same woman who had left this street. The pneumonia was still rattling in my chest, but the antibiotics had beaten back the fever. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a sharp, humming adrenaline. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. I was wearing my best court outfit, a sharp black pantsuit, a crisp white blouse. I was no longer Isabella, the victim. I was Ms. Connor, the trustee. Leo was safe at school, blissfully unaware, thinking I was at a very important work meeting. "Are you ready for this, Isabella?" Martin asked, his voice a low rumble. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's go." We walked up the path. My ruined files were gone. The bin of Leo's toys was gone. The lawn looked fine, as if nothing had happened. I didn't knock. I used my key. The lock clicked and I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Stale cigarettes, Dad had quit 20 years ago, and rotting fast food. The living room was unrecognizable. Shopping bags from Gucci and Sephora were piled on the sofa. Takeout boxes were stacked on the coffee table. Susan was on the floor, cross-legged in her pajamas, filming herself with a new camera, the one I now knew she'd bought with Dad's money. "And so," she was saying to the lens, pouting, "it's just been so hard, but your support means the world to me. My dad is finally safe and we're just healing." "Susan," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. Susan shrieked, dropping the camera. She scrambled to her feet. "What are you doing here? Get out, I'm calling the police." "We're already here," said the deputy, stepping in behind me. His large presence seemed to suck all the air out of the room. Susan's face went from smug to confused to pale white in about 3 seconds. What is this?" My father, Connor, appeared from the kitchen, a half-eaten donut in his hand. He was wearing a stained bathrobe. "Isabella, what is the meaning of this? I told you to get out." "Good morning, Mr. Connor," Martin Beckworth said, stepping forward. He placed his briefcase on the one clear spot on the dining room table. "I am Martin Beckworth. I was your late wife's attorney, and I am the legal counsel for the Eleanor Connor Irrevocable Trust." "The what?" Connor said, looking lost. "The trust, Dad," I said, my voice cold. "The one Mom set up to protect the family assets. The one she set up to protect you from her?" I pointed at Susan. "What is she talking about?" Susan snapped, her eyes darting between me and the deputy. Martin clicked open his briefcase. "Miss Susan Connor," he said, pulling out a sheaf of papers. "This is a formal 3-day eviction notice. You are to vacate this property immediately. As you are not a tenant but an unauthorized occupant, your 3 days are a courtesy." "Eviction." Susan laughed, a high, thin sound. "You can't evict me. This is my father's house." "No, it isn't," I said, finally letting the full weight of the truth land. "It hasn't been Dad's house for 2 years. It's my house." I watched the blood drain from my father's face. "Isabella." "What?" "This house, 112 Oak Street," Martin continued, his voice a calm, legal drone, "along with the majority of your late wife's liquid assets, was placed in an irrevocable trust. Your daughter Isabella was named the sole, acting trustee. You, Mr. Connor, were granted life tenancy." "See," Connor said, grasping at straws. "Life tenancy, I live here, and I say he pointed at me, gets out." Martin held up a hand. "Your life tenancy, Mr. Connor, is conditional. It is conditional on you maintaining the property and, most importantly, not engaging in any action that harasses, endangers, or otherwise impedes the duties of the trustee." He pulled out a second document. "This is a formal cease and desist. By throwing the trustee and her minor child out of the property, you have already violated those terms. By allowing your other daughter to drain the joint operating account, You are in catastrophic breach. The joint account? Connor stammered. The $10,000, Dad, I said. The money Susan spent in the last 48 hours, the new camera, the purse, the clothes. Susan finally found her voice. It was a roar of pure, desperate rage. You're lying, you're a witch, you tricked Mom, you tricked all of us. She lunged at me. The deputy didn't even flinch. He simply put out a massive arm and stopped her cold. Ma'am, I suggest you stay calm. And one more thing, Martin said, pulling a third document from his case. This is a restraining order. You are to stay 500 feet away from your sister, your nephew, and this property. And this, he said, handing her a thick packet, is a preliminary report from a private investigator, which we are submitting to the police, detailing your fraudulent activities in New York, as well as the elder financial abuse you have been committing here. The $10,000 you stole were pressing charges. That was the moment Susan broke. The influencer mask melted away. The golden child evaporated. What was left was a terrified, cornered animal. No, you can't. She whimpered, looking at Connor. Daddy, she's lying, tell her she's lying. My father, Connor, just stared at the papers in Martin's hand. He looked at the shopping bags, he looked at the new camera. And then he looked at me standing there in my suit, the key to the house still in my hand. Issa, Bella, he whispered, your mother. Mom knew, I said, my voice softening for just a second. She knew Susan, and she loved you. She wanted to make sure you were safe. She wanted to make sure we were safe. She made me promise I would protect her legacy, and that is exactly what I am doing. Susan's fake threats and lies were nothing. They were a house of cards. I had just hit her with a hurricane of notarized, legally binding truth, and her entire world was collapsing. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Susan, predictably, did not go quietly. The moment the deputy's arm retracted, she began a new performance. This one wasn't for her followers, it was for an audience of one. Daddy, she wailed, collapsing onto the floor in a puddle of silk pajamas. Don't let them do this. She's poisoning you against me. She's the one who's lying. She's always been jealous of me. Always. Connor, my father, was frozen. He was a statue of a man, his face gray, the half-eaten donut still clutched in his hand. He looked from Susan's prostrate form to the impenetrable legal documents on the table. He was a man caught between the lie he wanted to believe and the truth he couldn't escape. Mr. Connor, the deputy said, his voice now a steel command. This is a civil matter, but this woman, he gestured to Susan, has been served. She needs to pack a bag and leave the premises. If she refuses, she will be trespassing. Trespassing? Susan shrieked from the floor. In my own home? It is not your home, ma'am, the deputy said with tired patience. Daddy, do something. This was the moment, the pivot point. My father had to choose. He looked at me. His eyes were pleading. Pleading for me to make it stop, to rewind time, to make me the liar so he wouldn't have to face his own catastrophic failure of judgment. Dad, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the roiling emotions inside me. You have two options. You can respect the terms of Mom's trust, the trust you signed off on 2 years ago as her husband, and you can stay here as her life tenant. Or you can side with her, I pointed to Susan, and I will have Martin file for your removal on the grounds of violating the tenancy and facilitating felony-level financial abuse. You will have 30 days. You'd kick your own father out? He whispered, horrified. You kicked your own daughter and grandson out, I replied, the words hanging in the stale air. While I was sick, you threw my child's toys in the mud. You let her steal $10,000. Do not talk to me about loyalty, Dad. You have 3 days to decide, the same 3 days you gave me. The fight drained out of him. He looked old, older than his 65 years. He looked defeated. He slowly turned to Susan. Susie, get your things. The wail Susan let out was primal. It was the sound of a parasite being ripped from its host. You're choosing her? After everything I did for you? After I protected you from her? Get your things, he repeated, his voice a dead monotone. It took her an hour of screaming, crying, slamming doors, and throwing things. The deputy and I stood in the living room while Martin calmly took a photographic inventory of the damage. Susan emerged, dragging her 6 suitcases, her face a blotchy, tear-streaked mask of pure hatred. She paused at the door and pointed a trembling finger at me. You will never be happy, Isabella. You're a cold, heartless. Goodbye, Susan, I said, not even looking up from the inventory list Martin was showing me. She let out one more strangled sob and then she was gone, her suitcases rattling down the walkway. The deputy followed to ensure she left the property. The silence that fell in the house was heavy, suffocating. "I'll be back in an hour with a cleaning crew," I said to my father, who was still standing in the same spot. "Isabella," he started, his voice cracking. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "I can't. Not right now, I have to go pick up my son." But the case wasn't over. Martin and I had a meeting with the firm's partners, and the DA, the slander case was a slam dunk. The video, combined with my sterling employment record and the testimony of my bosses, was more than enough. But the fraud, that was what interested the DA. Mr. Klein's report was just the beginning. The DA pulled her New York file, the warrant, the multiple victims. "She's a piece of work," the DA said, flipping through the pages. "And elder financial abuse is a serious felony here, Mr. Connor." My father, who Martin had insisted attend, sat beside me, looking small in the oversized chair of the conference room. He had to listen as Mr. Klein laid out the full extent of Susan's deception. The DA brought in one of her other victims via video conference, a young woman in New York who had paid Susan $3,000 for a social media boot camp that never happened. The spell wasn't just broken, it was ground into dust. My father was forced, in the cold, sterile light of a legal office, to see his golden child for what she was, a common criminal. "We have enough to charge her with at least 4 counts, the DTA said. "The question is, Mr. Connor, are you willing to testify against your daughter?" I held my breath. This was the second and final test. Connor looked at the table. He looked at the young woman on the video screen. He looked at me, his daughter who he had betrayed. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "My wife, Alina, she knew all. Along, she tried to protect us." He looked at the DA. "Yes, I will." The irrefutable proof wasn't just the bank statements or the video. It was the testimony of a stranger, a past victim that finally, irrevocably, broke the bond. My father had to see that we weren't special. We weren't a family dispute. We were just the latest in a long line of Susan's victims. And with that, the case was sealed. The public showdown wasn't a party or a family dinner. It was a courtroom. 3 months had passed. 3 months of Leo and I living in the house and my father living in the guest room. It was a cold, quiet truce. He was respectful. He was quiet. He was drowning in his shame. He had apologized, a quiet, broken "I'm sorry, Isabella," but I wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. Susan, in her infinite arrogance, had pled not guilty. She had convinced herself, and apparently her exhausted public defender, that this was all a family misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by a jealous, controlling sister. She believed she could charm a jury just as she had charmed our father. She sat at the defendant's table in a demure, ill-fitting beige suit, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She was playing the part of the penitent, misunderstood child. It was a good performance, but the DA had a better one. The DA started with the New York victims, then the landlord, then Mr. Klein. The case against her for fraud was methodical, clinical, and devastating. Then my firm's managing partner, Mark, took the stand. He testified to my character, my exemplary work record, and the incalculable professional damage Susan's slanderous video had caused. He produced emails from clients who had paused their work with us, citing concerns after the video went viral. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, my head held high. I told my story. Quietly, factually, I spoke of the pneumonia, I spoke of the rain, I spoke of Leo's toys on the lawn, I spoke of the $10,000. Susan's lawyer on cross-examination tried to paint me as cold, calculating. "Isn't it true, Ms. Connor, that you set this all up, that you knew about this trust and held it over your father's head?" "No," I replied calmly. "I am the trustee. My duty is to the trust's assets, which my mother put in place to provide for my father's care and my son's future. I did not hold it over anyone. I enacted it when those assets were being stolen. Stolen, or just borrowed by a loving daughter? Was the $1,200 camera borrowed?" I asked. "Was the $2,300 handbag? Was the $5,000 business expense?" The lawyer had no answer. But the climax, the true, final moment, came with the last witness. The DA called Connor to the stand. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He shuffled as he walked. He sat in the witness box, a man utterly broken by his own folly. "Mr. Connor," the DA began, "can you identify the woman at the defendant's table?" "Yes," he whispered. "That's my daughter, Susan." "And can you tell the court about the events of November 12th? My father recounted the lie. He recounted his rage. He recounted throwing me out. He didn't spare himself. He admitted in front of a full courtroom that he had been poisoned by his grief and his own pride. "And what about the money, Mr. Connor? The $10,000. I let her take it," he said, his voice cracking. "She told me Isabella had been skimming for years and that this was just getting it back. I wanted to believe her." "You wanted to believe your daughter Isabella, a woman with a spotless financial record, was a thief, so you allowed your other daughter, a woman with a history of fraud, to take back money from an account?" "Objection," the public defender shouted. "Leading, sustained," the judge said, but the damage was done. The DA walked closer. "Mr. Connor, look at your daughter. Look at Susan. Do you have anything you want to say to her?" This was it, the public humiliation. My father turned, his eyes locking with Susan's for the first time. Her face was a mask of pleading. "Daddy, save me." He looked at her, and all the scales finally fell from his eyes. He wasn't seeing his Susie. He was seeing a stranger who had tried to destroy his family. I have one question," my father said, his voice gaining a small, trembling strength. "Why, Susie, why would you do that to your sister? Why would you do that to Leo, to me? Was it all just money?" Susan's penitent mask shattered, her face contorted. "You," she hissed, forgetting where she was, forgetting the jury. She stood up, pointing at me. "It's all her fault. She's the one who had everything. She had Mom's love. She had the house. She had the money. I had nothing. You all gave me nothing. I deserved it. It was my turn." The courtroom was silent. The public defender dropped his head into his hands. Susan had just confessed. Not just to the crime, but to the motive, the jealousy, the malice. She had in one public, humiliating outburst confirmed everything. The judge banged his gavel. "Order, order, the witness will," but it was over. My father in that moment had his final realization. He had made his choice. He had testified. And Susan, in response, had shown him exactly who she was. She had broken free of her own trap, only to run headfirst into one of her own making. The loser had just won. The jury's deliberation was short. Susan was found guilty on all counts. The judge, citing her complete lack of remorse, her history of fraud, and the callous and calculated nature of her crimes, especially the elder financial abuse and the slander of a legal professional, sentenced her to 3 years in state prison. The restitution, for both the trust and the New York victims, was in the 6-figure range. She would be in debt for the rest of her life. Her influencer career was over, replaced by a permanent public record of her crimes. The slander lawsuit settled out of court. Susan's apology, posted to her now-defunct social media account as a condition of the settlement, was a pathetic, legally vetted retraction that fooled no one. My firm used the settlement money to create a small pro bono fund for victims of elder financial abuse. I walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and breathed in fresh air for the first time in months. The pneumonia was long gone, but the weight in my chest had remained. Now it was finally lifting. My father was waiting on the steps. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a pain I finally understood. "Let's go home, Dad," I said. That night, I sat with Leo on his bed, reading him a story. He was happier now, the X's he used to draw over the house long since erased. Is Grandpa sad?" Leo asked, his head on my shoulder. "Yes, honey, he's very sad." Is he going to be angry again?" "No," I said, kissing his hair. "No, I don't think so. I think he's just learning." Later, I found my father in the kitchen, making tea. We stood in silence for a moment. She'll be 35 when she gets out," he said, his back to me. "Yes." I didn't. "Issa, I never knew she was like that. I missed your mother, and Susan, she was like a piece of the past, a piece of before, and He trailed off, his shoulders shaking. He turned, and for the first time, I didn't see the man who had thrown my son's toys in the mud. I saw my dad, a grieving, broken, foolish man who had been conned by his own blood. "I am so sorry, Isabella," he whispered, and this time the apology landed. I am so sorry, for Leo, for your job, for everything. I didn't rush to forgive him. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a magic fix, but it was a start. I know, Dad, I said, handing him a mug. We've got a lot of cleaning up to do. In the following months, he started to try. He went to grief counseling. He started helping with Leo, taking him to baseball practice. He meticulously deep cleaned the garage, polishing Mom's old car until it shone. One day, he presented me with a small, framed check. It's from my pension, he said, not meeting my eye. It's the first installment to pay back the trust for what I let her steal. It was $10,000. I looked at the check and then at my father. I pushed it back across the table. No, I said, but open a new account. Put it in Leo's name. For his college, that is how you pay Mom's legacy back. By investing in the future, not by paying for the past. He finally met my eyes and he smiled. A real, genuine smile. My life returned to a new, better normal. My firm promoted me. I was no longer just a paralegal. I was managing the entire estate planning division. My new role, born from my own trial by fire, was to help other families protect themselves. My mother's trust had been her last, greatest act of love, and now I was paying it forward. Justice was served. My son was safe. My father was healing. And I was, for the first time, in complete control. Susan's taunt echoed in my head one last time. Good luck surviving, loser. I looked around my kitchen, at my son's artwork on the fridge, at my father reading a book on the porch. I thought about my new office, my new title. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving.